Lucy Williamson. Well, Richard North is an environmental commentator from the Institute of Economic Affairs. He's in our Southampton studio. Mr. North, Hilary Benn's verdict was that it was a historic breakthrough. What's yours?
Well, I think I rather agree with your reporter. I mean, it's not bad. If it had been any weaker, it wouldn't have been worth the massive carbon footprint and the air miles involved. If it had been much stronger, I think it would have been so much hot air. I mean, really what's at stake here is that the Americans rather resist the UN and the EU's kind of pleasure in large, aspirational, wordy, rather whimsical treaties. And the US, Canada, Japan say, well, let's keep things in the real world and let's agree to do those things which actually we do believe we are likely to do. So in that sense, I think it's a realistic statement of where the world is right now.
It does seem to underline the fact that we're now in high politics rather than extensive science.
Yes, I think more or less that's true. I would have thought the scientific argument is in some sense over, except that there is the difficulty that it is still a huge unknown as to what will be the climate's response to the small amounts of policy we're likely to throw at it, as it were, in the next few years. I mean, I think at least half the kind of climate community, as it were, thinks that it's way too late for little measures to do much good. And the other half are more inclined to think, well, maybe doing a little will achieve something. Now, that is, if you like, a big scientific argument. But, I mean, politically, I think the world is more or less struggling towards the view that we will do what is cheap and convenient. And if it works, that's great. And we're trying to work out now what is the cheap and convenient thing to do.
Well, not many people think it's going to be cheap or convenient. The 100 independent scientists, engineers and economists wrote to Ban Ki-moon at Bali. Among other points they made is that, in their language, the current UN approach of curbing CO2 emissions is likely to increase human suffering from future climate change rather than to decrease it.
Well, all this is deeply problematic and much more problematic than the fans of Kyoto suggest. However, we have got both the CBI and Sir Nicholas Stern saying 1 or 2% of global GDP will make a huge difference to this problem if we spend it right. Now, I'm sceptical of that, but these are grown-up people who do a lot of thinking about it, and if they've come to that conclusion, then we might be able to make a difference quite cheaply and quite conveniently. But let's hope so, because I see no sign whatever of worldwide preparedness to take dramatic steps quickly. Maybe further down the line people will get more excited. Right now, the political consensus, if you like, the political reality is that people will do a bit, but not much.
Perhaps it would be easier to get agreement internationally if you were seeking agreement on adaptation to climate change and not on curbing emissions.
Well, the advantage of seeking agreement on adaptation is at least you're saying when a problem arises, wherever it arises, we will commit to helping those people in that situation. In other words, it's not a victim of, as they say, the tragedy of the commons, whereby if you're trying to abate climate emissions, you've really got to try and get kind of everybody to do it more or less at the same sort of time to make much of a difference.
Of course, North America at the moment is being swept by winter storms of unprecedented ferocity. Central Europe is having snow. The ski slopes have got a metre of snow on them suddenly. Peru has had one of the worst winters on record this July. I mean, we better get some serious warming soon, otherwise some of the political impetus is going to go out of this.
Well, I think people are beginning to understand that the paradox of global warming is that it produces climate change. It doesn't mean you're all going to fry everywhere. I mean, some places violent events are supposed to increase, and I imagine that includes cold ones. But I do agree with you that actually the rich world, when it looks hard at climate change, doesn't see nearly so much to fear from it as the poor world does. Now, if Florida starts getting really whacked, or Louisiana gets really whacked, then America might start taking climate change much more seriously. And of course, the curious thing about climate change is if America, if rich countries decide to take it seriously, they can solve the problem, as it were, all over the world, because action taken to reduce emissions in America, let's say, will help Bangladesh, let's say.
Just briefly, do you think the cause of the Green campaigners has been helped by the overhyping of it, the alarmism of the Al Gore movie, for instance, which projected sea level rises far, far in excess of anything the IPCC itself has come up with?
Frankly, I think the Green campaigners, we need to sort of get them out of the way, because we know the drum they're beating, we know the kind of things they're on about. I think this should be a matter for all people everywhere, whether or not they're of green sympathy or alternativist or hippie sympathy or not. And I think, to be honest, that the issue is already at least outside those sorts of old-fashioned kind of, oh, is this a sandal and long hair and hair shirt type of issue. I think it's crossed those barriers, and we now all accept that for good or ill, we're all in this. Working out what it is and what to do is, of course, very complicated.
Richard North, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Huge crowds have been gathering in the Gaza Strip for a rally to mark 20 years since the founding of the Palestinian Islamist movement Hamas. Senior Hamas leaders